The situation unfolding around Meghan Sussex, Prince Harry, and their daughter Lilibet once again highlights something deeply troubling about the way certain media outlets and commentators operate. What began as an ordinary story about parents protecting their child's name has spiraled into yet another manufactured controversy, one rooted not in facts, not in logic, and certainly not in fairness, but in a persistent obsession with the Sussex family. And now, unbelievably, some are attempting to drag a child into the middle of it. When grown adults feel the need to critique, dissect, or distort the name of a baby for attention or profit, it forces us to ask a fundamental question. What exactly is going on here, and why does this keep happening? The latest narrative claims that Meghan copyrighted the name Lilibet before her daughter was born, as if this is somehow a scandal, a violation, or an insult. What gets completely ignored is that protecting a child's name is something countless public figures do. Not to restrict anyone else, not to lay claim to historical names, but simply to shield their families from exploitation. It is standard, legal, normal, and widely practiced. Yet in this case, the story has been twisted into something sinister purely because the people involved are Meghan and Harry. And that pattern has repeated too many times to be accidental. Every small decision they make becomes hyper-analyzed. Every normal protective measure becomes a headline. Every family moment becomes an imagined controversy. But involving a child, that crosses a line. It is critical to pause and consider the hypocrisy driving this outrage. Royal names have been repeated and recycled across generations for centuries. Elizabeth has appeared countless times in the lineage. George, Mary, Victoria, Alexandra, Edward, these names echo across the family tree like clockwork. Parents name their children after grandparents, great-grandparents, and even distant ancestors without anyone perceiving it as controversial. It is tradition, it is heritage, it is continuity. So why suddenly is it unacceptable for Meghan and Harry to choose a name connected to their own family history? Why is it only a problem when it comes to their daughter? The answer is not complicated. Certain voices in the media have conditioned themselves to treat anything the Sussex family does as inherently suspicious. They need controversy, and when there isn't one, they manufacture it. The attempt to weaponize Lilibet's name exposes how far some people are willing to go simply to push a narrative. Instead of acknowledging that Meghan and Harry chose a name deeply connected to Harry's grandmother, the late Queen, critics twist it into something dramatic. Instead of acknowledging that the couple took standard protective measures for their daughter, it is framed as a power move or a calculated insult. And instead of respecting the obvious fact that children should always be off limits, commentators hand-wave their way into justifying why they feel entitled to involve a baby in their criticism. This kind of behavior is not just unfair, it is disturbing. When adults become so invested in discrediting a family that they drag a toddler into their commentary, it reveals far more about them than it does about the Sussexes. What stands out most is the sheer double standard. When political families, celebrity families, and even other royal relatives take steps to protect their young children, the media praises them for safeguarding their privacy. When Meghan and Harry do the same thing, somehow it becomes evidence of wrongdoing. When other royal couples name their children after the Queen or after historical figures with deep symbolic meaning, it is celebrated as a touching tribute. When the Sussexes do it, it becomes a scandal. When other public figures secure trademarks around their children's names to prevent companies from exploiting them commercially, it is understood as responsible parenting. When Meghan and Harry take identical actions, it is twisted into something they must be criticised for. The inconsistency is impossible to ignore. The question the critics need to answer is simple. Why is a baby being held to a different standard? Why is Lilibet the target of debates, scrutiny, and negative commentary from people who should know better? Children deserve to be protected, not dragged into manufactured drama to fuel views, clicks, or attention. No child deserves to have their name turned into a talking point for adults who have built careers around criticizing a family they have never met. It is one thing to have opinions about public figures. It is entirely another to turn those opinions into excuses to involve a child. There is also a disturbing pattern in how certain outlets report on Meghan Sussex specifically. No matter how many times a story is disproven, clarified, or debunked, some commentators continue repeating versions of it because negativity sells. The truth becomes secondary to outrage. Context disappears, balance evaporates. What remains is a cycle of engineered criticism that feeds on exaggeration and selective memories. If they acknowledged that the royal family itself has named children after the Queen repeatedly, the outrage would collapse. If they acknowledged that protecting a child's name from commercial misuse is normal, the narrative would collapse. And if they acknowledged that children should be off limits, the clicks would slow down. So instead, they push the drama harder, hoping no one notices how flimsy the argument actually is. What makes this particularly troubling is that Lilibet is too young to understand any of this. Too young to defend herself. Too young to even know her name is being picked apart by adults who do not know her, do not care about her well-being, and certainly do not consider the long-term impact of their words. That alone should make responsible commentators step back. But some do not. Why? Because for them, the Sussex family has become a never-ending source of content. And when the outrage cycle becomes more important than empathy, even children are no longer protected. This is why the public needs to question what these commentators are actually trying to achieve. What do they gain by criticizing a toddler? What do they gain by turning a name into another opportunity to twist a narrative? What kind of moral compass directs someone to focus negative attention on a child who has done nothing except be born into a famous family? It is important for viewers, readers, and audiences to understand that none of this is accidental. It is strategic. It is deliberate. It is designed to create noise, not truth. And the people who participate in it, knowingly, cross ethical boundaries because they assume no one will call them out. Meghan and Harry have made one thing clear from the beginning. They want to protect their children. They have every right to do so. They have the same rights as any other parents, regardless of their title, status, or background. Wanting privacy for a child is not scandalous. Taking legal steps to protect their daughter's name is not suspicious. Choosing a meaningful family name is not arrogant or aggressive. These are normal decisions made by normal parents, parents who happen to live under a microscope. Yet here we are again, watching a simple, personal, family-based decision being turned into fuel for another story, another round of criticism, another excuse to mention Meghan Sussex negatively. It is tiresome, it is predictable, and it is unfair. More importantly, it exposes how far some commentators will go to keep a negative narrative alive. When adults cannot separate their dislike of a public figure from the basic principle of leaving children alone, that tells us everything about their motivations. The truth is that Lilibet deserves the same respect any child deserves. The right to grow up free from public attacks, free from unfair narratives, and free from being used as a pawn in someone else's commentary. She is a child. She did not choose the spotlight. She did not choose the drama. She did not choose the narratives imposed on her parents. Her name should be something celebrated by her family, not debated by strangers with agendas. And the adults who continue to push these narratives should really ask themselves what line they are crossing and why. At its core, this entire episode reveals not only the hypocrisy of certain critics, but also the selective outrage that drives much of the coverage around Meghan and Harry. If this were truly about names, tradition, or history, then the same critics would be questioning all the other repeated royal names. But they are not. If this were truly about legal protection of names, then they would question every public figure who has taken identical steps. But again, they are not. This selective scrutiny shows that the outrage is not about Lilibet's name at all. It is about attacking Meghan Sussex. It is about undermining Harry. And disturbingly, it is about using a child to prolong a narrative that should have ended long ago. Children should never be collateral damage in adult conversations. They should not be dragged into commentary, speculations, or criticism. They deserve dignity, privacy, and protection. And the fact that some commentators continue to ignore these basic principles exposes just how disconnected their narratives have become from decency. So yes, people are absolutely right to question why a child is being targeted. They are right to question the double standards. They are right to question the motivations behind these stories. And they are right to call out adults who cannot find anything more meaningful to talk about than a baby's name. Because in the end, the only scandal here is the behavior of those who believe that attacking a toddler is acceptable simply because of who her parents are.